You are on Crocodile's True Stories channel. Enjoy listening. I didn't cry at the funeral. Not because I wasn't sad. God, I was. But the tears just wouldn't come. It was like my body already knew this loss wasn't going to be the one that broke me. That would come later. Franklin meant something to me. More than just a mentor or a friend. He was the one who believed in me when I was some clueless 25-year-old trying to pitch a business plan that barely made sense on paper. He didn't just back me, he backed me. That kind of loyalty, that quiet faith, it sticks with you. He was family in every way but blood. So as I stood there in the second row, surrounded by suits and hushed voices, I expected emotion to hit like a wave. But nothing came. Just this heavy silence inside me. I watched the casket descend, the roses settle on top like a soft blanket, and still, nothing. Jenna stood across the aisle, dressed in black, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy. Her arms folded, posture stiff, like someone playing a part. She didn't reach for me, didn't glance my way. That's when it started. The noticing. The guy next to her was tall, maybe early 40s, sharp jaw, clean cut, probably someone Franklin had worked with. But it wasn't who he was that stuck with me. It was the way Jenna leaned in to whisper to him. The way her fingers brushed his sleeve, lingered for just a beat too long. The kind of touch that says, we've done this before. It could have been nothing. But I knew better. I just didn't want to know better. Later, during the reception, I tried to pull her aside. Just to be near her. To grieve together, maybe reconnect. I hadn't realized how long it had been since we'd really seen each other until that moment. Standing in a stranger's house, surrounded by tiny finger sandwiches and murmured condolences, feeling like an outsider to my own marriage. Do you want to go? I asked her, quietly, when I finally got a moment alone with her near the staircase. She didn't look at me right away, just sipped her wine and stared into the living room. You can go if you want, she said. I'll catch a ride later. Catch a ride later. With who exactly? I didn't ask. I just nodded and stepped away, suddenly hyper-aware of the man in the navy suit laughing with someone near the fireplace. Jenna had been slipping away from me for months, maybe years. But it wasn't until Franklin's death that I started to take stock of just how far gone she really was. At first, it had been the little things. Conversations that felt more like business transactions. Her phone always locked, always face down, always on silent. Business trips that she insisted were too boring for me to tag along on. Her eyes drifting to the corner of the room whenever I tried to talk about anything heavier than the weather or what we should order for dinner. We used to talk for hours. About music, travel, politics, our dreams. Hell, even stupid things like what our dog would be named if we ever got one. Now, even sitting across from each other at dinner, it felt like we were in separate cities. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped laughing at my jokes. Stopped noticing me, really. I blamed myself for a while. Told myself I'd gotten too comfortable. That I wasn't showing up the way I used to. That I'd become boring. Predictable. But then I realized something brutal. It wasn't that I'd changed. It was that I'd been phased out. Quietly. Gradually. With surgical precision. The love hadn't just faded. It had been relocated. Repurposed. Reassigned. Franklin's death, as devastating as it was, cracked something open in me. I started retracing everything. The sudden coolness in her tone. The way she smiled at texts when she thought I wasn't looking. The last-minute overnight stays in cities that weren't listed on her itinerary. The passwords that got changed for security. And the urgent calls she always took in the other room. One night, just 2 weeks before the funeral, I'd gotten home early from a canceled meeting. Her car was in the driveway, but the house was dark. I thought she might be napping. She'd said she was exhausted lately. But when I walked inside, I heard her voice upstairs. Not talking. Laughing. I crept up the stairs, feeling a little stupid, like a kid sneaking cookies. Her door was closed, the light on under the crack. I froze. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me already knew what I'd find if I pushed it open. But I didn't open it. I stood there for another minute, heart pounding, then turned around and walked back downstairs. She never mentioned I came home that night. Never asked why I didn't say hello. A few nights later, she told me she was going to spend the weekend at her sister's place upstate. When I offered to come, she said, "It's just going to be family stuff. You'd be bored." I knew better than to ask twice. I stayed home and tried to ignore the silence. After Franklin's funeral, the guilt I'd been carrying morphed into suspicion. And suspicion, once planted, grows fast. I started watching her. Nothing obvious. Just noticing how she triple-checked her reflection before leaving the house, even to get groceries. How she always smiled at her phone, then erased her browser history. How she laughed more in front of others than she ever did around me. Then came the moment I couldn't shake. 3 nights after the funeral, I woke up around 3 a.m. Jenna wasn't in bed. The bathroom light was off. I padded quietly down the hall, thinking maybe she couldn't sleep either. I found her in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to her ear, whispering something I couldn't make out. When I stepped into the doorway, she jumped. "Logan, Jesus, you scared me. Who were you talking to?" She blinked fast. "No one. I was checking an email. I couldn't sleep." At 3 in the morning? She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket over her lap and muttered something about being cold. I nodded and walked away. I didn't believe her. Not anymore. In the days that followed, everything changed, not on the outside, but in me. I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. I stopped assuming I was the problem. Because once you start keeping track of the lies, once you write them down, so to speak, there's no going back. They form a pattern, a map, a story, one where you're not the hero or the villain, just the one left behind. The morning after the funeral, I woke to an empty bed. No note, no text, no sound in the house, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional rustle of leaves outside the window. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself this was normal. That grief does strange things to people. That maybe Jenna had gone out for a walk, or needed to clear her head. But that hope vanished the second I saw her car still in the driveway, and her phone left charging on the kitchen counter. She hadn't left the house. She just hadn't come to bed. I didn't look for her. I didn't knock on the guest room door. I sat down at the kitchen table and made coffee like it was any other day, like I hadn't just buried a man who meant more to me than my own father ever did. Like my wife hadn't spent the last several months treating me like a ghost she couldn't admit was still haunting her life. Jenna came downstairs just after 8, dressed like she'd never gone to sleep. Hair down, fresh lipstick, her expression unreadable. "Morning," she said, as she breezed past me to the sink. "Morning," I replied, staring into my mug. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "I've got a few calls to make today. Legal stuff. Franklin's office is a mess." I looked up at her. "That's not your responsibility." She didn't blink. "He left a lot undone. I'm just trying to help." I didn't argue. What was the point? Instead, I waited until she went upstairs again, then pulled out my laptop. I wasn't planning on spying. I wasn't, but curiosity had finally outpaced my denial. I checked our shared calendar, looking for gaps, anything unusual. Sure enough, there were business trips and conferences that didn't appear in her email confirmations. Then I logged into our bank account. I hadn't looked closely in months. Jenna handled most of the bills. It wasn't negligence, it was trust. But as I scrolled, I saw things that didn't fit. Boutique hotels in cities she'd never mentioned, Uber rides that ended in neighborhoods we didn't have friends in, dinner charges at rooftop lounges I'd never heard of. One charge jumped out at me, a 2-night stay at a resort up north, booked under her name, but billed on our joint card. The weekend she claimed she was at her sister's place. My hand hovered over the mouse. I told myself there could be an explanation, but I already knew better. She came back downstairs an hour later, phone to her ear, pacing through the living room. I listened, silent, as she said things like, "I'll send over the paperwork," and "No, he doesn't suspect anything." Her tone was crisp, businesslike, detached. When she noticed me watching, she ended the call and smiled. "You hungry?" she asked. I was thinking about making omelets. I stared at her. "Who were you talking to?" She tilted her head, eyebrows raised. "Franklin's attorney." I didn't respond. I just nodded and went upstairs. That afternoon, I found myself driving aimlessly, windows down, the cold air sharp against my face. I couldn't sit in that house another minute. Couldn't sit across from her and pretend we were still a team. I parked at the marina, one of Franklin's old haunts. He used to take me fishing there, back when I was still trying to prove myself. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, thinking about the last real conversation we'd had, just a few months ago. "You're too good for all this politicking," he'd told me, voice gravelly with age but firm. "You need to watch your 6, Logan. Not everyone's got your back." I didn't know what he meant then. Thought he was just being cryptic, like always. But now I wasn't so sure. 3 days after the funeral, I came home unexpectedly in the early afternoon. A meeting had been canceled, and I didn't feel like going back to the office. I figured I'd surprise Jenna, maybe suggest we go grab lunch, some small attempt at reconnection. I parked in the driveway and noticed her car was there. Music floated down from the upstairs window. Something soft, jazzy, her favorite. As I stepped through the front door, a strange smell met me. Wine. Something floral and expensive. And underneath that, something else. Something I couldn't name, but it put me on edge. The music continued. I heard movement upstairs. Laughter. And then silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful. The kind that knows it's been interrupted. I took the back staircase. Quieter, though it still creaked under my weight. When I reached the bedroom door, I didn't barge in. I didn't kick it open. I stood there for a second, breathing. Then I opened it. She was on the bed, in lingerie I didn't recognize, something black, barely there, lacy around the edges. Her hair was down, makeup flawless, legs crossed like this was just another Thursday. Beside her sat the same man from the funeral, the one in the navy suit. His jacket was off, top buttons undone, shoes missing. They both froze when they saw me. Jenna's hand slid off his shoulder like she'd just remembered it was there. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I didn't speak. Not a single word. I turned around and left. I didn't run. I didn't slam the door. I walked down the stairs, out the door, into the cold afternoon, and got in my car. I sat there for a long time, engine off, heart hammering. I waited for the fury, the explosion, the flood of accusations. But none of that came. Only numbness. And then my phone buzzed. A notification from our bank. A large withdrawal had been made from our joint account. $25,000. Transferred to her private checking. No message. No explanation. Just a receipt. It hit me harder than seeing her on the bed. That was the confirmation, not just of the affair, but of the calculation behind it. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't grief. It was a plan, executed with precision. I didn't go home that night. I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town, paid in cash, and collapsed onto the scratchy bedspread, staring at the ceiling. I didn't cry. Still couldn't. Instead, I lay there, replaying everything. The distance. The lies. The man in the navy suit. And Franklin. Because suddenly, even he didn't feel like a safe memory anymore. The next morning, I called Franklin's law firm. Logan Bennett. I said to the receptionist. I need to schedule a meeting. It's about his estate. There was a pause. We were just about to contact you, she said. The will's being read next week. You're listed as one of the named parties. I didn't respond, because the only question in my mind now was this. Had Franklin known? I didn't go home the next day. I spent the morning sitting in the corner booth of an empty diner, nursing the same cup of lukewarm coffee for hours. The waitress stopped asking if I needed anything else after the third refill. She must have seen the look on my face, the kind of look that doesn't invite conversation. The motel bed hadn't offered much sleep. The sounds of the neighboring rooms, the TV through the wall, the occasional cough, the rhythmic thud of footsteps above me, had kept me awake, but it wasn't just that. My mind was a war zone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. On our bed. With him. The image burned in my brain, crisp and cruel. Her laugh. His hand resting on her thigh. The sheets we used to sleep under twisted beneath them. And that look on her face when she saw me. Shock. Yes, but not shame. Not panic. More like inconvenience. As if I had walked in on something scheduled. I should have said something. Demanded answers. Thrown a punch, maybe. Something to break the moment, to mark it. But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew. I just didn't want to hear it out loud. By the time I left the diner, the sky had turned a dull, cloudy gray. I drove around town aimlessly, past our favorite Italian place, the park where we used to walk after dinner, the bookstore where we met 10 years ago, when she dropped a copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray and I joked that Wilde would have hated how polite she was. Those places felt like crime scenes now. I finally parked outside my office building, but I couldn't make myself go in. What was I supposed to do? Sit at my desk and pretend to care about balance sheets while my life was caving in? Instead, I sat in my car for another hour, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the man looking back. Same blue eyes, same crooked nose from that high school basketball injury, but something was different. There was a hollowness in the eyes, a vacancy I hadn't seen before. By the time I returned home, the sun was going down. The house looked untouched, like no one had moved all day. I half expected her car to be gone, her suitcase missing, a note on the kitchen table telling me she needed time to think. But no, she was in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Hey," she said like nothing had happened. "Did you get my text?" I didn't answer. She took a sip, then leaned against the counter. "Logan, look, about yesterday. I know it looked bad. It wasn't what you think." I laughed, loud and sudden. She blinked. "What? You're gonna sit there and lie to me in the house we built together?" I said, stepping into the kitchen. "You think I'm that stupid?" Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "I'm not lying. It's complicated." "No," I snapped. "It's not. I saw you. I saw everything." She looked down. "It was a mistake." "No. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did was a choice." My voice was rising now, heat finally flooding through the numbness. "You chose him. You chose to lie. And then you chose to empty our account on your way out." She crossed her arms, suddenly defensive. "That money was mine, too. Not for you to steal while you were half naked in my bed with another man." She said nothing. I stepped closer. "How long?" Her eyes flicked up, then away. "A few months." My stomach turned. "Let me guess," I said bitterly. "Started after one of those boring business trips I was too busy to join?" Her silence was answer enough. I stood there, trying to remember the last time she'd said she loved me and actually meant it. The last time her kiss didn't feel like a chore. "You could have just left," I said finally. "You didn't have to burn the whole thing down." Jenna looked at me, her expression unreadable. "I didn't want to hurt you. That did it." I let out a sharp laugh and stepped back. "You didn't want to hurt me? You destroyed me, Jenna. You stood there at Franklin's funeral, holding his hand, wearing my last name, and you lied to my face. That's not mercy. That's cruelty dressed up as cowardice." She looked down again. No tears, just a tight, practiced stillness. I walked out of the room. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because I was kicked out, because I couldn't bring myself to walk into that bedroom again. The bed was no longer mine. The next few days were quiet. Jenna tiptoed around the house like a polite stranger. We barely spoke. I stopped checking my calendar. Didn't care about meetings, deadlines, calls. I let my phone die and didn't bother charging it. But then came the letter. For days after the funeral, a courier arrived at the front door. Envelope. Embossed seal. Inside, a formal invitation to the reading of Franklin's will. I stared at the page for a long time. Jenna walked in as I was setting it down. "What's that?" "Reading of the will," I said without looking up. Her eyes lit up, just for a second. "Oh, when?" "Tuesday. Downtown." "I'll come with you," she said. I didn't answer. But when Tuesday came, we drove together. The office was cold, sterile. Mahogany walls, glass partitions, the faint smell of expensive paper. Franklin's lawyer, Mr. Carlyle, greeted us with the somber grace of a man who's made a living off other people's grief. There were only a handful of us in the room. Me, Jenna, Carlyle, and one other man I didn't recognize. Carlyle got right to it. No preamble. No condolences. To Jenna Hart Bennett, he read, "A monetary inheritance of $5 million, transferred immediately upon execution of this document." Jenna didn't flinch. She didn't smile, either. Just sat there like she'd been expecting it. Carlyle continued. "To Logan Bennett." I straightened, not knowing what to expect. I figured Franklin would have left me something. A small share in the company. A letter, maybe. "Logan is hereby named as legal trustee and executor of the Franklin D. Ashwood estate, effective immediately. This includes oversight of the following assets: 2 private properties, 3 LLCs, and a family trust totaling." He kept reading, but my ears buzzed. "Trustee? Executor? Why me?" Jenna sat up straighter. Her expression cracked for the first time. Carlyle wasn't done. "There is one final beneficiary," he said, pulling out a second folder. "A dependent. Jason." The name meant nothing to me. I glanced at Jenna, but she looked as stunned as I felt. "Jason is the biological son of Mr. Ashwood," Carlyle explained. "Born in 2010. The estate, in its entirety, outside the specific gifts already mentioned, is to be held in trust for Jason until he reaches the age of 21. The room shifted. The air felt thin. "Logan," Carlyle said, "you were named as Jason's legal guardian, should anything happen to Franklin prior to Jason's adulthood." Silence. I couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Jenna finally did. Wait. What? Carlisle looked up. Ms. Hart Bennett. There's no. Franklin didn't have a son. That's ridiculous. He did, Carlisle replied calmly. And Logan is now his legal guardian. Jenna stared at me, her face contorted, somewhere between disbelief and rage. I didn't say a word, but inside, something settled. For the first time in days, I felt like the room wasn't spinning. Because Franklin had known. He'd seen it all coming. And in his final act, he handed me the only thing Jenna couldn't fake, couldn't buy, couldn't take. Control. Jenna didn't speak the entire ride home. She sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was holding herself together. Her lips were pressed into a hard line, her foot tapping rapidly against the floor mat like it had somewhere to be, like her anger was trying to find a way out. I didn't say a word either. The silence between us was miles long, paved with everything left unsaid over the last few months. She didn't even wait for the car to fully stop before opening the door. Slammed it hard enough to shake the glass. She stormed up the steps and into the house, and I let her go. I sat there behind the wheel for a moment, letting the engine idle, trying to collect whatever was left of my thoughts. Franklin had blindsided us both. He'd left her money, sure, a generous amount, but that wasn't what stung her. It was the fact that he'd left the power to me. The estate, the properties, the business assets, and above all else, the trust. Jenna could cash her check and disappear, but the real legacy, the one she thought she'd inherited by proximity, was in my hands now. And the boy, Jason, 15 years old, living in some small desert town I'd never heard of with a mother who, according to Carlisle, had kept quiet all these years out of respect and maybe a little fear. Franklin had set up the trust years ago but hadn't updated anyone, hadn't even told Jenna, who considered herself the closest thing to family he had. That omission had cracked something open in her. Back inside the house, she was pacing. When I entered, she whirled around. "This is insane," she said. I tossed my keys on the entryway table. "Is it?" "Yes," she snapped. "Franklin never mentioned a kid. Not once. And suddenly you're supposed to be his guardian? It doesn't make sense." "It does if you think about it," I replied calmly. Franklin didn't trust anyone else. She stared at me, eyes narrowing. "But why you?" That hit harder than she probably intended. Like I didn't deserve it. Like it was some oversight, some clerical error. I asked myself the same thing, I said. But the answer's simple. He knew what you were. Her expression shifted, just for a second. A flicker of something, guilt? Fear? It was gone before I could name it. "That's rich," she said, crossing her arms. "You really think he'd hand you control of all that out of charity?" "No. I think he knew you'd try to manipulate your way into it. That you were already trying, maybe." She said nothing, but I saw it then, clear as day. The shift in her weight. The eyes darting away for half a beat too long. "What did you do, Jenna?" I asked quietly. "Don't play righteous with me," she said, her voice rising. "You weren't some golden boy in Franklin's eyes. I never had to be. I just didn't lie to him." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I moved past her, toward the kitchen. I needed air. Space. Something to ground me. "You're not seriously going through with this," she called after me. "I don't think I have a choice." She followed, voice sharper now. "You have every choice. You could contest it. You could say you're not equipped." "I am equipped," I said, spinning to face her. "I've run businesses, balanced ledgers, kept this household from collapsing while you were off, wherever the hell you were. And now a 15-year-old kid with no one else in the world needs someone to advocate for him. So yeah, I think I'm the right choice." Jenna looked like she wanted to throw something. Her hands clenched, her jaw tight. This was supposed to be my future. There it was. Not Franklin's legacy. Not grief. Not shock. Mine. I stared at her, and everything started to make sense. The sudden closeness with Franklin near the end. The late-night calls she said were foundation stuff. The tight smile she gave when his name came up in conversation. "You were trying to rewrite the will?" I said slowly. She froze. "Weren't you?" She tried to scoff, to wave it off. "That's ridiculous." I stepped closer. "You pushed your way into every meeting. Played the dutiful goddaughter. You thought he'd hand it all to you, didn't you? Don't be dramatic. You tried to cut me out." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "You weren't grieving," I said. "You were positioning." "That's not true, isn't it?" I walked away before she could answer. Over the next few days, she stayed unusually quiet. No more fights. No more accusations. Just long silences and 2 friendly smiles. I knew that look. It was the one she used when she was playing chess behind the scenes. And I wasn't about to be her pawn again. I called Carlisle. I need everything, I told him. Every file, every document, every record Franklin left behind. He didn't hesitate. Of course. Franklin prepared something for you before he passed. I'll have it delivered. 2 days later, a courier arrived. A black leather portfolio and a flash drive. I locked myself in the home office and opened it. Inside were notarized memos, property deeds, company stock breakdowns, and letters. Dozens of them. Typed, dated, structured. Each one a breadcrumb. And then there were the emails. Correspondence between Franklin and his legal team. One thread caught my attention. The subject line, Trust Revision, Urgent Request from Jenna Hart. I clicked. The email was dated 6 weeks before Franklin died. Jenna had requested a meeting to reconsider the structure of the estate. She argued that I was emotionally unstable, disinterested in the long-term vision, and unfit to handle a multi-million-dollar trust. She went on to suggest that another party, unlisted, might be a more suitable executor. I scrolled, stomach tight. Then I saw the attachment. A memo with bullet points. Logan's travel schedule makes him unavailable. Logan is unfamiliar with trust law. Franklin's legacy requires a dynamic, strategic voice. Suggested alternative, C.H. Initials only. C.H. Carlisle had mentioned the man from the funeral. Conrad Hollis. The one on the bed with her. That was him. She hadn't just lied. She had plotted. There was one more file, footage. Security cam, Franklin's lakeside home. Dated just 3 days before his stroke. Jenna, pacing on the patio. You don't need Logan involved, she was saying, clearly unaware of the camera. He'll ruin this for you. He doesn't have vision. Conrad. Then who do you suggest? Her answer was immediate. Us. Us. My stomach turned. Franklin had seen this. Had heard it. Had filed it. He knew exactly what she was doing. And in the end, he chose to protect his legacy by giving it to the one person she couldn't manipulate. Me. That night, Jenna cooked dinner. Pasta. Her signature. Like it was any other night. Smells good, I said, taking my seat. She smiled, that same too sweet smile. Thought we could eat together. Like we used to. I nodded, eating in silence. Halfway through, I set my fork down. I saw the emails, I said. Her hand froze midair. I saw the video. She didn't deny it. Didn't gasp. She just looked down. You tried to replace me, I said. I was scared, she whispered. Of what? That Franklin wouldn't see what we could build. I stared at her. We. She didn't answer. I stood up. Jenna, your money's frozen. Carlisle's notified the trust committee. There's going to be a review. She finally looked at me. You can't do that. I already did. You're not going to win. I leaned in. I already did. Then I walked out of the room, leaving her with the cold pasta and everything she'd tried to take. The flight to Arizona was booked under an alias Franklin used when he traveled discreetly, something I found buried in one of the folders Carlisle gave me. Matthew Granger. It was how Franklin visited Jason and his mother over the years without alerting the press, the company board, or, most of all, Jenna. The trust documents made it clear I was to assume full guardianship of Jason, Franklin's only biological child. There was no ambiguity, no wiggle room, no clause to delay or avoid it. I was the one Franklin had chosen to bridge the past to the future. Jenna didn't say a word when I told her I was leaving town. She stood in the doorway as I packed, arms crossed, eyes cold. You're really going to do this? She asked. I'm not doing anything. Franklin did, I replied. You're walking away from everything we built. No, you burn that down. I'm walking toward what's left. She didn't respond. Just watched me zip the suitcase shut like I was stealing something from her. In a way I was. Control. Narrative. Power. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't playing defense. The town Jason lived in was called Vernon Ridge, one of those blink-and-you-miss-it places 2 hours outside Phoenix. Dry, dusty roads, scattered ranch homes, a single gas station, and a diner that doubled as a post office. It was the kind of town Franklin would have hated, but he'd return to it again and again. I met Jason's mother, Elena, at a small adobe house with sun-faded siding and wind chimes made from old silverware. She greeted me with tired eyes and a wariness I couldn't blame her for. "You look like him," she said, holding the door open. "I've heard that a few times this week." Inside, the place was modest. Handmade quilts, sun-bleached family photos, the scent of lavender and dust. Jason sat at the kitchen table, chewing the end of a pencil. Thin, freckled, red-brown hair that didn't quite behave. He looked up at me, guarded but curious. "Elena," I said gently, "I know this is a lot. You don't know me. But I know of you," she interrupted. "Franklin trusted you. I hope to earn that trust from you too." She nodded slowly, folding her arms. "He told me when Jason was born that this day might come. He just never said it'd be this soon." I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet. Jason looked up again. "Are you really supposed to take care of me?" "Yeah," I said softly. "If you'll let me." He didn't answer, just went back to his math worksheet. Elena and I sat on the porch later that evening. She poured sweet tea into mason jars and told me what Franklin had never shared. He came here once every couple months. Always quietly. Never stayed more than a day. Said he didn't want Jason growing up in his world around all that noise. I nodded. "He kept you secret. He kept Jason safe." She took a long sip. "He always said if something ever happened, you'd know what to do. He said you were loyal, that you were the only person he'd ever bet on." That caught me off guard. Franklin was never one for compliments. "I'll do right by him," I said. "By both of you." The next morning, I took Jason for a walk around the property. It wasn't much, some dry grass, a few scraggly trees, a rusted swing set, but it felt important. "Do you like math?" I asked, trying to break the ice. "It's fine. What do you like?" He shrugged. "Drawing. Stuff like that." "Can I see sometime?" "Maybe." A pause. "Did you know my dad well?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I did." "Was he a good person?" I stopped walking. That question hit harder than I expected. "He tried to be," I said honestly. "He didn't always get it right, but he cared about you. More than anything." Jason nodded, eyes focused on the ground. "He told me I was a secret. Not because he was ashamed," I said quickly. "Because he didn't trust the people around him to protect you." He looked up at me. "Are you one of those people?" I met his gaze. "Not anymore." That night, I called Carlisle. "He's smart," I said. "Quiet. Thoughtful. And he deserves better than what he's had." "I figured as much," Carlisle replied. "We've beg asterisk in transferring assets into the oversight account. You'll receive weekly updates." "And Jenna?" I asked, still pressing. "Her legal team's trying to claim undue influence. But with the video and her emails, it's not likely she'll win." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "She won't stop," I said. "Not unless someone stops her. We'll handle it." The next few days passed slowly. I stayed in Arizona longer than I thought I would. Helped Jason with homework. Took him into town. Got him a sketch pad from the general store. He didn't say much, but I could see the shift. A little more relaxed each day. A little less guarded. When I finally returned home, it felt foreign. Like a replica of my life that no longer fit. Jenna was waiting. "I heard you met him," she said. I ignored her and moved past. "You really think this is your second act?" she called out. "You, the reluctant guardian? It's pathetic." I turned. "Better than being the woman who tried to rig a dead man's will." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You think you've won." "I don't need to win," I said. "I just need to outlast you." Her mask cracked. Just a little. Enough to remind me that this wasn't over. I started converting the guest house into a proper living space. Jason would be arriving in a few weeks to start school here. I met with counselors, tutors, lawyers. Franklin had left everything in place. He planned it all down to the detail. I was just following through. A few nights later, I found Jenna in the office, staring at the flash drive Carlisle had sent. I'd left it there deliberately. "You had no right to go through this," she said. "He gave me every right. You think this kid changes everything? That suddenly you're a father figure?" "No," I said. "But maybe I'm finally someone he would have been proud of." Jenna stood, voice rising. "You're not better than me." "I don't have to be," I said. "I just have to not be you." She slapped the drive onto the desk. "You're going to regret this." I looked her in the eye. "You already do." The next morning, her car was gone. She left a single note on the kitchen counter. "Don't think this is over. You got lucky." But it wasn't luck. It was choice. It was consequence.